Former Finance Minister Mrs. Kemi Adeosun was in cloud nine on Wednesday after a federal high court in Abuja ruled that she had no obligation to produce a National Youth Service Corps certificate to hold any public office in Nigeria. Delivering judgment in a suit instituted on her behalf by a senior advocate of Nigeria, Wole Olanipekun, Justice Taiwo Taiwo held that the former minister could not have presented herself for participation in the NYSC program because under the 1979 Constitution, which was in force at the time of her graduation, she was not a Nigerian citizen either at the time of her graduation or when she turned 30. Although Adeosun may feel vindicated by the court ruling, according to reports, 2 cases of forgery of the NYSC exemption certificate that she presented to secure her appointment as minister are still making their way through the courts. Now here to discuss yesterday's ruling and make sense of the subsisting lawsuits against Mrs. Adeosun, we have with us 2 lawyers, Inibehe Effiong and Dele Ogun. Good morning, gentlemen, and welcome to the morning show. Good to have you here.
Good morning to you.
Good morning, Dele Ogun. Inibehe.
Good morning, Dr. Abati.
Abadi, good to have you on the program.
Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning. Yes, good morning. Quickly, I'd like to start with you, Inibehe. What are the big issues, in this particular, what are the big issues in this matter with regard to what looks like the vindication of former Minister of Finance, Kemi Adeosun? And then, of course, with regard also to the relevant provisions in the 1979 Constitution, the 1999 Constitution, and also Section 13, I think, subsection 2 of the NYSC Act. We'll go with you first, and then we'll also ask Dele Ogun to respond to the same issue. Section 25, I think, in the 1999 Constitution.
Thank you. Good morning, Dr. Bati, Rufai, and Todong. It's my pleasure to speak with you.
Good morning.
Now, I want Nigerians to appreciate the issues very clearly. And the first submission I want to make to you is that cases are determined based on the pleadings before the court, based on the averments made before a judge. Cases are not determined necessarily based on public perception. And I'm saying that to make the point that, to my mind, to the best of my knowledge, the issues submitted for determination before Honorable Justice Taiwo Taiwo of the Federal High Court in Abuja was whether or not Kemi Adeosun was required to possess a National Youth Service certificate or an exemption letter, as it were, to make her eligible to occupy a ministerial position. And also whether, given that she was not a Nigerian citizen at the material time, whether she was even eligible to enroll in the NYSC. But the saga, the conundrum, the controversy and the scandal that surrounded the NYSC certificate as it relates to Kemi Adeosun was that there was an allegation report by a credible media organization that she forged an exemption certificate, which is a criminal offense. So the case before the Federal High Court was not to determine whether indeed she committed forgery or not. That question remains undetermined because the Attorney General of the Federation, for reasons best known to him, exercised his prosecutorial discretion by deciding not to charge the former minister for forgery. So let that point be understood clearly. And I'm saying that because you asked the question whether this was a vindication. And I submit to you that I do not see the judgment of the Federal High Court as a vindication, because what was material, what led to her resignation, was the allegation of forgery, which has not been determined, which has not been tried for, which no evidence has been adduced, because the AGF has decided not to prosecute her. But my position on the judgment, or what my reaction is that we would have to look at this judgment in the light of the facts, as I said. To begin with, when you look at Section 2 of the National Youth Service Corps Act, Cap N84, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004, the procedure, the requirements for calling up corps members is statutorily provided, including that one has to be less than 30 years at the point of graduation, either in Nigeria or abroad. Now, you must also go further to look at Section 11 of the NYSC Act, which provides that anybody who has enrolled in the service, in the corps, has to be issued a certificate of participation. You go further to Section 12, which provides that any person seeking employment must be required by the employer to produce his NYSC certificate. Again, you take it to Section 13, that prescribes and provides for certain offenses and penalties, including forgery of certificates under the Act, which is the issue that relates to Kemi Adeosun. Now, lastly, I refer you to Section 17 of the NYSC Act on exemption from participation from the scheme. And of course, a candidate is required to make an application to the National Security Council through the National Directorate to be exempted. And where that determination is made, that person will be issued what is called Certificate of Exemption. So the issue is this. Kemi Adeosun made a point that she submitted her certificate during her ministerial screening to the SSS, to the National Assembly. Nothing was found wanting, that she didn't believe she had forged it, but do not forget that in her resignation letter to the president, she did consider, she did make an admission that her certificate was found not to be genuine. So to that extent, I think with profound respect to the former minister, it is an insult on the sensibilities of Nigerians for her to now come today and say she has been vindicated. Because as I have clarified, the issue before the court was not forgery, because the AGF, in exercising its prosecutorial discretion, decided not to prosecute her. Now let me take you to the Constitution. What is the requirement for a person to be made a minister? Again, I refer you to Section 147 of the Constitution that has essentially three conditions. The first is that the person must be 25 years of age. The person must be sponsored by a political party, which must also be a member. Again, of course, it is also required that that person has to be appointed by the president and must also have at least school certificate level or its equivalent. Now, those requirements are not expressly stated in Section 147. But Section 147 says that you can only be a minister if you are eligible to contest for the position of the House of Representatives. Now, Section 65 of the Constitution states the requirements to be a member of the House, which is what I had highlighted. Well, so to that extent, the court is right in saying that she didn't need an NYSC certificate to be a minister, because a political position is not really governed by labor law. It is not an employer-employee relationship. It is an elective position or an appointive position. Well, but I also make the point to you lastly.
Inibehe, I get the point.
Yes, on the question of citizenship.
Yeah, I get the point that you have made, but you also know, as an officer in the Temple of Justice, that a court of law does not necessarily go on a voyage of discovery. it will deal with the matters that are presented before it. And I think you've already made that point, that what was before the court was Kemi Adeosun trying to protect our reputation. And if you look at Section 26 of the 1979 Constitution, at the time, our main argument, the gravamen of the case, was as at that time, she was not a citizen of Nigeria. She had British citizenship. By 1989, when she graduated at the age of 22, she was still not a Nigerian citizen. Okay, you go to the 1999 Constitution, which in Section 25 states how you can be a citizen of Nigeria. But by the time she returned to Nigeria, after taking visas and all of that, the law had changed. But at the time she graduated, she was not a citizen of Nigeria. That was the position that the court, talked about. The court did not go into all these issues of forgery, but I've seen some stories in the papers about how she was asking for a determination of her status rather than whether she was eligible for NYSC or not. But let's listen to Dele Ogun, who is also a lawyer and who has been, focusing on the case. Dele Ogun, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, good morning to you all. First of all, let me make a disclosure. Kemi is my junior sister, so that I put that on the record, but that doesn't affect the legal issues that we're considering. What the court clearly determined was that the law, the NYSC law, did not apply to her at the relevant time. So she was exempt from the law as a matter of fact and as a matter of law. That is very relevant to the issue of forgery, because motive is a consideration. Now, let's move to the allegation of forgery, which was made by the Premium Times, and it was repeated by them, even in this coverage of this judgment, where they said, although Mrs. Adeosun forged her NYSC certificate to be appointed minister, the issue of forgery was not brought before the court, as the federal government has refused to prosecute her for that. The simple reason why the government has not charged her or prosecuted her for forgery is that there was no forgery. Let's break it down for the members of the public. The starting point is this. She was entitled to the exemption certificate. The second point is this, and that's what the judgment established. The second point is this. Vanguard newspaper, 9th of July 2018, confirmed, they reported a statement issued by NYSC that Kemi did apply to them for an exemption certificate. So she was entitled and she applied for what she was entitled to. Next fact, the certificate was procured for her by the office of the governor of Ogun State, who at the time were looking to engage her services as the Commissioner of Finance for that state. That is a fact. Next fact, the certificate was cleared by State House of Assembly, the National Assembly, and the Department of State Security prior to her employment at state and federal levels. Now, coming to the issue of the basis of the allegation of forgery, was there an investigation? Now, admittedly in her resignation letter, she said, I have today become privy to the findings of the investigation into the allegation made in an online medium that the certificate of exemption from National Youth Service Corps that I had presented was not genuine. The reality was that that is what she was told at a meeting in the Vice President's office, that there had been an investigation and that the investigation had found that the certificate was not genuine. Was she issued with an investigation report? No, she was not. Has anyone seen that investigation report? No one has seen it. So she was told orally that there had been an investigation and that the finding was unfavorable. And it was in response to that statement, which she had no reason to doubt, that she decided that the honorable thing was to resign. But where is that investigation report? It does not exist. And I can confirm that it does not exist because I acted for her when the Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales decided to investigate the matter, because obviously they heard allegations that a member of their institute had forged a document. These facts that I've presented to you are the very facts that I presented to them. And they were surprised to hear that there was no written investigation. Suffice to say that as we speak, Kemi Adeosun is still a proud member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales. She would not have been such if they were not satisfied with the explanation that had been presented, that there was no forgery. Now, clearly there are questions to be answered. There are questions to be answered by the government. What happened to that investigation report? Where is it? Given that it was confirmed that NYSC did receive an application from her for the exemption certificate, which this judgment has confirmed that she was entitled to as a matter of law and as a matter of fact. What happened to that application? It does not make sense that somebody has submitted an application to the rightful body for an exemption certificate and that she received an exemption certificate through the offices of the governor of a responsible state government. And then it is said that it was forged. Absolute nonsense. So the government, I'm afraid, does have a case to answer. Let's see the investigation report, if it exists. But our evidence is that there was no investigation report.
Right.
Secondly, premium times definitely have a case to answer, because if forgery is alleged, and it's a serious allegation, then it rests on the person making the allegation to substantiate that allegation. And the standard of the burden of proof, as my learned friend would know, is not on a balance of probabilities, but beyond reasonable doubt.
Right.
So there's our case.
Well, thank you, Mr. Ogun. And Kemi Adeosun's resignation was honorable indeed. I have to ask you at this point, though, that will she be bringing an action against Premium Times based on what you've said? That's my first question. My second question is for both of you. Will you please sound a note of caution with regards to this court decision that was made in favor of Kemi Adeosun, lest we have Nigerians with dual nationality thinking that it applies to them as well? Some people might err in this regard. So I'd like you to please stress that, the both of you. But first, Mr. Ogun, please answer the question with regards to the possibility of bringing an action against Premium Times.
You can be reassured that if an organization, as I understand it, they claim to be Nigeria's leading newspaper for reliable breaking news and deep investigative reports about Nigeria. Now, we've got to get away from this practice of trial by newspaper and media reports. Allegations must be substantiated, and they have a responsibility now to substantiate the allegation, which they've repeated, that she forged that document.
Right. With regards to with those who might err in thinking that this court judgment that applies specifically to the facts of Mrs. Adeosun's case, might apply to them because they hold dual nationality, I'd like you to address those people before, some people make a mistake.
Well, the explanation to them is this. Many were affected by these changes in the definition of who is a Nigerian citizen. The real detail was this, that she was a Nigerian citizen at birth, but she was, and we were all stripped of that Nigerian citizenship by virtue of the 1979 Constitution, which prohibited dual citizenship, unless you took the positive step within 1 year of you attaining the age of 21 to surrender your foreign citizenship. And she did not surrender British citizenship. And I suspect many of our diaspora people were in the same situation. They probably did not know about the change of the law, and they certainly did not take the step of surrendering their British and American citizenships to keep the Nigerian one. And so the same principle applied to them. They were similarly exempt from the NYSC law, and they would have committed a criminal offense had they actually participated in the NYSC in circumstances where they were not eligible to do so. So the principle is of general application.
Thank you, Mr. Ogun. Mr. Effiong, do you have anything to add to that? Advice for people with dual nationality who might believe that they're exempt from NYSC?
Well, let me just highlight who a citizen of Nigeria is by birth. I think that point needs to be made under the current conditional arrangement.
Section 25.
Now, I refer you to Section 25 of the Constitution that defines citizenship by birth under 3 heads. The first is that any person born in Nigeria before the date of independence, either of whose parents or whose grandparents were indigenous or with indigenous to areas, any of the areas that are indigenous to Nigeria belong to an area that is indigenous to Nigeria. The second is any person born after independence, that is after October 1st, 1960, either of whose parents or whose grandparents were citizens of Nigeria. The third is any person born outside Nigeria, either of whose parents is a citizen of Nigeria. But understand the point my learned friend has made regarding the definition of citizenship under the 1979 Constitution. Now, here is the point. The NYSC Act came into existence. The commencement date is June 1993, when it came into force. I do agree that by virtue of the judgment, the law has now been clarified to the point that those who were not citizens of Nigeria under the 1979 Constitution, who are in the same position with Kemi Adeosun, may not necessarily be required, in fact, are not required to participate in the scheme. But again, I will also advise and challenge media organizations, including Premium Times, to go to the Federal High Court, file an application to obtain the certified true copies of the processes filed, the originating summons filed by Kemi Adeosun, and of course, the counter affidavit of the Attorney General of the Federation. Because the point my learned friend has made is important. And I think Nigeria as a country deserves answer to the question that he has raised. Where is the investigation report? If I understood what he said, he's saying that Kemi Adeosun applied for certificate of exemption. Possibly wrongly so, possibly based on a wrong advice, because the court has said she didn't have to apply. But that what was eventually given to her was not a genuine certificate. In other words, somebody in between Kemi Adeosun and NYSC forged and concocted a forged certificate. Who is that person? Because the brother also disclosed, thankfully, that that document was procured through the Ogun State government. Who is the official in the Ogun State government that forged or that procured did forge document for and on behalf of Kemi Adeosun.
Okay.
If this is a government that fights corruption, if this is a government that pretends to have integrity,
Okay.
I challenge Malami, I challenge the Attorney General of the Federation, I challenge the Vice President because his office has also been mentioned. They have a responsibility to disclose to Nigerians who actually obtained that document and handed it over to Kemi Adeosun, and tell us that why that person is not on trial. But let me also caution that under Section 17 of the NYSC Act, exemption certificate is personal. The law does not give allowance for that exemption certificate to be obtained by proxy. So I do not agree entirely that Kemi Adeosun had no question whatsoever to answer.
Okay.
But I understand the point that has been made, that she may have been misled.
Okay.
I do get that point. But whether she should sue Premium Times, my humble advice, free advice as a lawyer, is that I will advise her not to take that course of action. Because I believe strongly so that Premium Times will be availed by the defense of justification, in the sense that what was published was true. The certificate has been shown not to be genuine. There is question as to the investigation report. She actually resigned. In her resignation, she considered that she has been told the certificate was not genuine. And I want the brother to tell us, has Kemi Adeosun applied officially for a copy of that investigation report?
Okay.
She has a responsibility to apply for it. Let him also disclose to us, have they applied for that report as of today?
Okay. Inibehe, two things. Number one, when we started this conversation, you brought the case of forgery, and you said that was a very important case. But when Dele Ogun spoke, he'd been able to debunk that, and it's a little bit hazy for me now, because if this passed through the Ogun State government, the House of Assembly in Ogun State, passed through our National Assembly, because she was screened, and passed through the screen of the DSS, and none of these check lines discovered the fact that the certificate was forged, then there is something more that meets the eyes. That's one. That's for you. That's going to be after the break. And secondly, Mr. Dele Ogun, I still have some questions to ask you after the break. I'd like to ask, did Kemi Adeosun pick up any appointment even before she became commissioner in Ogun State? Or was it directly coming from diaspora to work in Ogun State? Okay, we'll unpack all of this and we'll come back. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. Still Morning Show right here on the Rises channel. Trying to unpack all of this Kemi Adeosun. Should I call it debacle? Yeah, debacle, pretty much. So moving on to it, I did ask a question from Mr. Dele Ogun. I said, I'd like to have an understanding. Inibehe, like I asked before, you know, how did all of this go through all of these lines? You know, DSS, Ogun State Parliament and the likes, and all of this screen, and nobody picked it out. That's the one for you. But for Mr. Dele Ogun, okay. So Inibehe, take your part, and I'll come back to Mr. Dele Ogun to ask him those questions. Thank you. Inibehe, quickly.
Yeah, if I could just say quickly, I don't think Nigeria should be surprised. The SSS, the State Security Service, the police, and the National Assembly have over time proven to Nigerians beyond reasonable doubt that they are more of a political institution than legitimate law enforcement agencies. And I say that with all sense of responsibility. You couldn't have had this not uncovered during their investigation, when they did fact-checking, when they did security clearance. What is the point of the security clearance? So it is not surprising. I think this is an embarrassment that they have to admit to. This is a shame that they have to own up to, because somebody has to take responsibility. But the crisis we have as a country is that policy of punishment, that policy of responsibility is not there. Nobody is being penalized. Those who screen her have not been questioned. Those who look at that document have not been fired, because we do not have a government today in this country that is genuinely interested in accountability, in transparency, and fighting corruption. That is my reaction to the issue. And I hope that they will own this embarrassment and own this failure on their part.
Thank you so much, Inibehe. I understand you have to quickly run. Thank you so much. But Mr. Ogun, real quickly, did she work anywhere in Nigeria before she picked up that appointment with the Ogun State government as a commissioner? And what were the terms? Was this NYSC certificate asked for, or this, what's it called now, exemption certificate? Was it required then? What were the terms? I would like to know a little bit about that. And secondly, there have been tunes in some quarters that this is just a political Italian job being done here just to get her out of office. I mean, what's your take on that? What's your reaction to that? Because with this judgment, definitely, she still has a stake. She can come back and become anything she wants to become in this country.
Thank you. Yes, let me be clear. My learned friend keeps committing the fundamental error of saying that the document was forged. It's a plain fact. Forgery has not been proven, has not been established at all. It was never alleged by the government. It was alleged by Premium Times. There was no charge sheet alleging forgery. Premium Times reported that the certificate had been forged. And what I've said to you is that various tiers have gone through the checking process. The State House of Assembly, the National Assembly, the Departments of State Security. They would not have missed forgery if there was in fact forgery. The explanation is this. The responsible department that should have confirmed that they issued that certificate in response to her application, because that's the fundamental point that I want the public to take away. They've admitted that they received an application for a certificate of exemption. What did they do with that application? Where is it? What happened to it? Because if you then have a certificate that then emerges that looks authentic, and when it comes from the office of the governor of one of our 36 states, there's no reason to doubt it. So the allegation is completely baseless, and my learned friend should desist from confusing the public in assuming that forgery has been admitted or established. What she said in her resignation statement was that she was told that there had been an investigation and that the certificate was not genuine. And what I've tabled for the audience and the public is this. If there was such an investigation that did make that finding, I presume there was a forensic examination of the said document, the public are entitled to see it. It does not exist. And anybody who seeks to allege forgery must prove it. You can't prove it simply by allegation alone and trial by media. There was no forgery. If there was forgery, she would not be, as we speak, a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales. Now, coming to your point about did she have any other employments before being appointed Commissioner of Finance in Nigeria? Yes, she did. She did work in Nigeria. It was the responsibility of the employer to ask for the certificate of exemption. Now, one final point. Because the responsibility rests on employers to ask for NYSC certificate, in the circumstances where somebody is exempt, they will similarly ask for a certificate of exemption. So the fact that the reason she applied was that although she knew that she was exempt from the law did not apply to her. By virtue of that obligation on the employer to ask for the NYSC certificate or a certificate of exemption, that's why the application was submitted and the certificate then emerged. So all the allegation of forgery is a nonsense. I mean, it would be bad enough if they said she presented a forged certificate. No, they've gone so far as to say she herself forged it. Let's get that clear. That's what I say. She herself forged it. Not that she presented one, because you can present something innocently, assuming it's forged, but it's not. NYSC simply have not come clean to say they issued that certificate in response to her application.
Well, Dele Ogun, will you agree that we probably may not have seen the end of this matter? Kemi Adeosun versus the Attorney General of the Federation. Are we likely to see a possibility where the Attorney General of the Federation would go on appeal and perhaps, some other resolutions may be, provided at the end of that appeal process? However, what has been established is that she has a right to defend her reputation. And she's been quoted in the papers as saying that she will take consequential steps to further protect her reputation. As a brother, what are those consequential steps likely to be? From my end?
Well, Premium Times will find out very, very soon indeed. As for the government, it is really for them to take their share of the responsibility and tell the public what the public is entitled to hear. But certainly Premium Times that have repeated the allegation of forgery should expect a very interesting communication very soon.
Well, thank you very much, Dele Ogun and Inibehe Effiong, who has moved on to attend to a case in court. Thank you very much for joining us on The Morning Show.